It's fake, sis. Don't reply. That's a direct message from the German rapper Loon, almost 400,000 followers on TikTok, over 1 million listeners on Spotify, sent to a 2-3-year-old beauty blogger named Khadidja, who had just done exactly what you're supposed to do when something feels off online. A stranger had messaged her out of nowhere, an account called Lune Official, no real followers, offering her a spot in a secret music video. Good pay, big artist. Just show up, look beautiful, keep it quiet until the song drops. Khadidja didn't bite. She went straight to Loon's real account and asked, "Is this you?" Loon's answer was immediate. "It's fake, sis. Don't reply." And Khadidja listened. She closed the conversation. She moved on with her life. 48 hours later, a different account sent a different message. No mention of music, no celebrity name. This time it was a cosmetic clinic offering a state-of-the-art laser hair removal session, a treatment worth 2,500 euros completely free in exchange for one Instagram post. The account looked professional enough. The offer made sense in her world. And there was no Loon to write to this time, no one to check with, no name to verify. Khadidja said yes. She didn't know that both messages came from the same person. She didn't know that the woman behind the screen had already sent 26 of these messages to 26 different women, refining the pitch each time one of them said no. She didn't know that the salon address she'd been given belonged to a barber shop owned by a man whose ex-wife wanted him to think she was dead. And she didn't know that nobody, not Instagram, not the platform, not any of the 25 women who received similar messages and quietly declined, had reported a single thing. Today I'm analyzing the psychology and systemic architecture behind what German courts called the Doppelgänger Murder, a case where a 2-3-year-old woman named Shahraban K hunted for her own lookalike on Instagram, lured her into a car, and had her stabbed 56 times so her parents would find the body and believe their daughter was dead. Both defendants received life sentences in December 2024 after an 1-month trial. But I'm not here to retell what happened. I'm here to trace the thing nobody else followed, the system of silence that made Khadidja disposable before she was killed and invisible after. Because here's what kept me in this case. Everyone focused on the doppelganger, the bizarre plot, the thriller novel premise. And I get it, it's a headline that writes itself, but the longer I sat with the evidence, the more I realized the lookalike angle is the least interesting thing about this murder. The most interesting thing is what connects every single failure in this case, from the uncle who blackmailed instead of speaking, to the family that threatened instead of listening, to the platform that delivered a warning and a death sentence through the same inbox, to the German court that convicted 2 people of taking Khadidja's life and then didn't bother to tell her family. It wasn't one silence that killed Khadidja. It was all of them, stacked, ordinary, and perfectly legal. But to understand how she ended up in that car, you first have to understand the woman who put her there. And to understand Shahraban, you have to see something most people missed. She wasn't someone who snapped. She was someone who escalated visibly for years in front of everyone. And the pattern, once you see it, makes the murder feel less like madness and almost inevitable. Shahraban K was 7 years old when her family arrived in Germany. They were Yazidi practitioners of one of the oldest continuously observed religions in the world, an ethno-religious faith, closed door, you can't convert in. If you leave permanently. And in 2014, ISIS launched a coordinated genocide against the Yazidi people in northern Iraq. Thousands were beheaded, thousands more were kidnapped, enslaved, trafficked. Girls as young as 9 were sold to soldiers. The United Nations formally recognized it as genocide. And so Yazidi families fled, many of them, to Germany, where a diaspora was already quietly growing. I bring this up not as background. I bring it up because it's the first wall of the cage. When you survive something like that, when your family crosses continents because their faith nearly got them exterminated, tradition doesn't feel like tradition anymore. It feels like the reason you're alive. And for the older generation of Yazidis in Germany, preserving those traditions wasn't cultural preference, it was survival debt. You hold the line because people died so you could. But for their children born in Germany, raised on TikTok and Turkish pizza shops and public transit, that debt feels like a lock on a door they didn't build. Shahraban grew up in that tension. And by most accounts, she didn't handle it quietly. People who knew her in school described her as someone who craved attention, specifically male attention. That's their word, not mine. And I'll note that the same behavior in a teenage boy would be called popular. But Shahraban's family operated under a specific framework. She was not to date, period. If she dated, marriage was the only acceptable next step. And if she married, it had to be another Yazidi, same caste. The religion has 3 castes, and you marry within yours. So when Shahraban is 18 and kissing a boy named Rawan at a subway station, and her uncle sees it, the reaction isn't a conversation. It isn't disappointment. It's leverage. Her uncle, according to multiple sources close to Shahraban, began blackmailing her. We don't know exactly what he extracted: money, control, something else. What we know is that instead of telling her parents, he held the information over her. And this is the first silence that matters. Not because the uncle is the villain, but because it establishes the operating language of Shahraban's entire world. In her family system, information isn't shared, it's weaponized. So I checked what happened when her parents eventually found out anyway. They didn't punish her, they didn't separate them, they told Shahraban and Rawan to get married immediately. Because if you're going to date, you're going to do it within the structure. And this only worked because Rawan happened to be Yazidi, happened to be the right caste. If he'd been anything else, the story would have ended here probably violently. They married, they opened a hair salon, mostly Rawan's barbershop, with Shahraban doing occasional facials and bridal updos on the side. From the outside, it looked like the system worked. 2 young people, properly matched, building a life. But here's where I need you to pay attention to a detail that almost everyone skimmed past. During the marriage, Shahraban broke into Rawan's brother's house and tased him in the back of the neck. Just showed up, walked in, and pressed a taser into the base of his skull. When he spun around, she immediately started apologizing, profusely, begging for forgiveness, as if she'd tripped and accidentally electrocuted him. Now, most coverage treats this as a quirky anecdote, but I sat with this one for a while because why the brother? Not Rawan, not her own family, Rawan's brother, the person who, according to testimony, most openly opposed Shahraban, the person who didn't want her in the family, the person who stood between her and the version of the relationship she wanted. Now hold that, because later, after the marriage collapsed, after Shahraban got pregnant by another man, after Rawan called her father and said, "I'm done," Shahraban paid 5,000 euros to a contract killer. The target? Rawan's brother, the same person she tased. The hitman took the deposit and never carried out the job. But the court convicted Shahraban of attempted incitement to murder on this count alone. This wasn't a rumor. This wasn't gossip. This was a conviction handed down alongside the life sentence for Khadidja's murder. And this is where my first reading of the case fell apart. I went in assuming what everyone assumes, that Shahraban was a desperate woman trapped in a rigid family system who hatched an absurd plan to escape by faking her own death. That's the doppelganger narrative. That's the headline. And it's clean enough to fit on a thumbnail, but the taser and the hitman point somewhere else entirely. She didn't start by trying to escape. She started by trying to remove the obstacle, the same obstacle, twice. And when neither attempt worked, when the taser didn't scare him and the hitman didn't kill him, that is when the plan shifted to Khadidja. Everyone asks why Shahraban wanted to fake her death. That's the wrong question. The right question is, why did she try to eliminate her brother-in-law twice before she ever opened Instagram to search for a lookalike? Because the answer reframes the entire case. This wasn't a woman who woke up one day and decided to do something insane. This was a three-stage escalation. Version 1, physical violence she could deny. Version 2, outsourced violence she could distance herself from. Version 3, a murder designed so that she would be the victim, not the suspect. Each version was more sophisticated than the last. Each version had more separation between her and the act. And each version happened because the previous one failed and nobody, not Rowan, not his brother, not the family, not the police, treated it as what it was, a pattern. Now, I want to be precise here. Understanding the escalation doesn't excuse it, but it does destroy the myth that this was unpredictable. It was the opposite. And the reason nobody predicted it is the same reason the uncle blackmailed instead of talking. The same reason the father threatened 3 human lives instead of having a conversation. The same reason Rawan went into hiding before the trial instead of trusting that the system would protect him. In Shahraban's world, problems weren't discussed. They were managed silently, through leverage, through threats, through force. She didn't invent that language. She learned it. And then she spoke it more fluently than anyone expected. The psychiatric evaluation confirmed it, 4 days with a court-appointed psychiatrist, no psychotic disorder, no break from reality, IQ approximately 86, just above what Germany classifies as a learning disability. The defense used this to argue she was too dumb to plan a doppelganger murder. The prosecution countered, "We never said she was smart. If she'd been smarter, she might have realized how terrible the plan was." But the psychiatrist said something else, something that matters more than the IQ number. Shahraban was, quote, extremely impulsive, manipulative, and believes manipulation is the best way to get what she wants. Believes manipulation is the best way to get what she wants. Not that she's capable of manipulation, that she believes it's the best method, preferred, default, the tool she reaches for first. And where do you learn that belief? You learn it from a system where the uncle blackmails, the father threatens, the family arranges, and every problem is solved by whoever has the most leverage over whoever has the least. Shahraban didn't break the rules of her world. She applied them with terrifying consistency. And the one person who had nothing to do with any of it, who existed in a completely separate life, a completely separate country of origin, a completely separate set of dreams, was a 2-3-year-old in Heilbronn who wanted to be an interpreter, who loved languages, who worked at a cafe, and who one day received a DM from a stranger asking if she wanted to be in a music video. Khadidja had no warning, no context, no uncle whispering threats, no escalation pattern to read. She had an algorithm, a set of cheekbones, and the worst luck of anyone in this story. So how did Shahraban find her? And more importantly, once Khadidja said no to the first approach, how did Shahraban get her to say yes to the second? The answer is in 26 messages. And what they reveal isn't just predatory behavior. It's a system that lets predators learn. Here's a detail I want you to sit with before I explain it. Prosecutors recovered Shahraban's phone. On it, they found multiple Instagram accounts. Not 2, not 3, multiple accounts. Each created for a different purpose, each with a different name, none connected to the others in any visible way. And from these accounts, they traced a total of 26 outbound messages. 26 DMs sent to 26 different women across Germany. All of them were in their early 20s, all had dark hair, brown eyes, similar skin tone, between 5'2" and 5'4". They didn't look identical to Shahraban. The defense would later argue, correctly, that most of them didn't even look particularly similar, but they shared enough surface features that if you were squinting, if you were desperate, if you needed a body to pass for yours in the back seat of a dark car with tinted windows, close enough might be enough. 26 messages. 25 of them went nowhere. Ignored, declined, left on red. But nobody talks about those 25. Nobody asks what they looked like, what they were offered, what made them say no. So I checked. The first approach, the one we know about, because Khadidja almost fell for it, was aspirational. A music video, a famous artist, secrecy, glamour. The fake account was named Loony, official, designed to look adjacent to the real rapper Loon. The pitch: you have great charisma, you'll be paid well, you don't have to do much. It's a known artist. It has to stay secret until the song drops. Think about the psychology of that offer. It targets identity. It says, you've been noticed. Someone important saw you and thought you were special. The secrecy isn't a red flag in this framing. It's proof of exclusivity. You're being let into a room that most people don't even know exists. And for most of the 26 women, it didn't work. Maybe the account looked too thin. Maybe the pitch felt too vague. Maybe they just didn't care about being in a music video. Whatever the reason, 25 women looked at some version of this message and either ignored it or said no. Khadidja didn't ignore it, but she didn't say yes either. She did the smart thing, the thing that every digital literacy PSA tells you to do. She went to Loon's verified account and asked directly, and Loon answered immediately, clearly. 4 words that should have saved her life. It's fake, sis. Don't reply. Khadidja closed the conversation, and right there the story should have ended. But here's what I keep coming back to. Loon warned Khadidja. That's real. That matters. But Loon didn't report the fake account. Or, if she did, it wasn't removed because the infrastructure behind it was still active. And Khadidja, who now knew that Lune Official was a scam, had no way of knowing that the person behind it had 25 other accounts, 25 other identities, 25 other angles of approach, and 48 hours of patience. 2 days later, a completely different account sent a completely different message. No music, no celebrity, no glamour. This time, the offer was practical. A cosmetic clinic reaching out to influencers for a collaboration, a laser hair removal session using a state-of-the-art medical-grade device. Worth 2,500 euros per session, completely free. The only ask, post about it on Instagram afterward. Now look at what changed between pitch 1 and pitch 2. The music video offer was aspirational but unverifiable. It asked Khadidja to trust a name she could check, and she checked, and it collapsed. The beauty treatment offer was transactional and self-contained. There was no celebrity to verify, no famous person to DM, just a clinic, a service, and a price tag. The offer validated itself. 2,500 euros is a specific enough number to feel real, and the exchange, free treatment for a post, is a deal that actually exists in the influencer economy. Khadidja had probably seen similar offers before, legitimate ones. So I want you to think about this. What was different about the offer Khadidja accepted versus the one she rejected? It wasn't that she got more gullible in 48 hours. It's that the pitch got smarter. The first offer had a checkable claim, and she checked it. The second offer had no checkable claim because there was nothing to check. A clinic offering a free treatment in exchange for exposure is the most normal DM an influencer receives. There's no loon to write to. There's no real account to verify against. The scam became uncheckable by becoming ordinary. And this is the part that made me stop reading for a while. 26 messages, most of them failed. In any other context, we'd call that a conversion funnel. Shahraban was running a campaign, each rejection sharpening the next attempt, each silence teaching her what didn't work. The music video angle was too exotic, too verifiable, too far from the target's actual world. The beauty treatment angle was native. It lived inside Khadidja's daily reality. It didn't ask her to step into someone else's world. It came to hers. And Instagram, the same platform that delivered Loon's warning, delivered the second lure with exactly the same legitimacy. Same inbox, same notification sound, same blue hyperlink. The platform doesn't distinguish between a DM that says it's fake, cis, and a DM that says, come to this address and we'll take care of you. They arrive in the same place, with the same weight, and the reader has to sort them alone. But there's one more thing about the second approach. One detail that elevates it from catfishing to something colder. The salon address Shahraban gave Khadidja was real. It was Rawan's barbershop, her ex-husband's actual business, a place that exists, that you can find on a map, that has reviews and a phone number. So if Khadidja had done what she did the first time, if she'd tried to verify, she would have found a real salon at a real address. The lie was built on a foundation of fact. And that's not impulsive. That's not someone with an IQ of 86 flailing. That's someone who learned from failure. There was one problem. The salon was 100 miles from Khadidja's apartment, a 3-hour drive. That's a significant ask, even for a 2,500 euros treatment. Driving 6 hours round trip is a barrier. And Shahraban solved it the way any good sales funnel solves friction. She removed it. The salon manager Shahraban, operating under yet another identity, offered to pick Khadidja up from her home, drive her to the appointment, and drop her back off afterward. Door-to-door service, zero effort required from the target. Every barrier that could have made Khadidja pause was anticipated and neutralized. The offer was familiar, the address was real, the distance was handled, the cost was zero. And the one defense mechanism that had worked, checking with the real person behind the name, had been engineered out of the equation. August 17th, 2022, Shahraban and a man named Sheqir got into a car and drove to Khadidja's town. They picked her up. And on the way to the salon, as the sun dropped behind a long stretch of woodland between Heilbronn and Ingolstadt, Shahraban pulled over. She said she was lost. She asked Khadidja to step out and read the road sign. I want to hold here, not on what happened next. You already know what happened next. I want to hold on the road sign because that's the last moment where anything could have been different. Khadidja is standing on the shoulder of a dark road in a forest she's never been to, looking at a sign she was asked to read by a woman she trusted for exactly the reasons she was designed to trust her. And behind her, 2 car doors are opening. 26 messages, 25 refusals, 2 fake accounts, 1 real salon address, 1 free ride, 1 road sign. That's the funnel, top to bottom. But there's a person I haven't accounted for yet. The man in the driver's seat. The man who opened his door in that forest. The man who, according to the forensic report, inflicted 56 stab wounds concentrated on the face, chest, and neck of a woman he had never met, had no grudge against, and had known about for a matter of weeks. Sheqir K was not Shahraban's husband, not her ex, not her family. He was a Kosovar man in his mid-20s who, by the prosecution's account, met Shahraban at a bar shortly before the murder. And the prosecution's explanation for why he did what he did, he was promised a relationship with her. That's the motive. That's what they argued in court, that a man stabbed a stranger 56 times in the face because a woman at a bar suggested they could be together if he did. I didn't buy that at first. I thought, that's the prosecution filling in a gap because the real answer is unknowable. And maybe it is, because across 50 hearing days, across 11 months of trial, across 190 witnesses called to testify, Sheqir K said nothing. Not one word, not one statement, not one explanation. And what he did from inside his prison cell makes his silence even harder to read. Let me tell you what we know about Sheqir K. It won't take long, because almost nobody knows anything about Sheqir K. He's Kosovar, mid-20s at the time of the crime. He met Shahraban at some point in the weeks before August 17th, 2022. The prosecution never pinpointed exactly when or where, though multiple witnesses placed Shahraban at bars around this time. leaning into men she barely knew, asking the same question over and over. Would you kill for me? She asked it the way you'd ask someone to help you move apartments. Direct, almost casual. And most of the men, because she asked several, treated it the same way. Sure, babe, anything for you. The kind of thing you say to someone when you're 3 drinks in and you want them to think you're dangerous. Nobody meant it. Shahraban knew they didn't mean it. She was sorting, testing, looking for the one who wouldn't just say yes to impress her, but would say yes and mean it. So I checked, what do we actually know about the moment Sheqir agreed? And the answer is almost nothing. The prosecution argued that Shahraban offered him an intimate relationship in exchange for his participation. That's the official motive entered into the court record. A relationship, that's it. I want to sit with how thin that is, because the prosecution isn't guessing out of laziness. They're guessing because Sheqir gave them nothing else to work with. He didn't confess. He didn't explain. He didn't deny. He didn't negotiate a plea. He didn't blame Shahraban. He didn't claim self-defense, coercion, mental illness, or diminished responsibility. He didn't say a single word to the police, to his lawyers in open court, to the judge, to the 190 witnesses who testified around him, or to the press that covered every day of the proceedings. 50 hearing days, 11 months, 190 witnesses, 0 words from Sheqir K. Now, silence in a criminal trial isn't unusual. It's a right. In Germany, as in most legal systems, a defendant can refuse to make any statement, and no negative inference can officially be drawn from that refusal. Defense attorneys advise silence all the time. It's a strategy. A smart one, often. But most defendants who stay silent do so selectively. They let their lawyers speak. They provide instructions behind closed doors. They react to nod, a head shake, a visible emotion when testimony hits close. Something leaks. Some fragment of a human response makes itself visible across 11 months of being talked about, analyzed, dissected, and convicted in a room you're sitting in. Sheqir gave nothing. And when I say nothing, I mean that the court reporting from Euronews, from Business Insider, from the Daily Mail, from the German press, consistently uses the same phrasing. Neither Shahraban nor Sheqir K have ever made a statement or commented on the accusations, not declined to testify, not exercised their right to silence, never made a statement. The language suggests something beyond legal strategy. It suggests a wall, and here's where I need to be honest about where my own thinking shifted. My first read of Sheqir was the easy one, the one most coverage defaults to. He's the follower. The weak link, the guy who got manipulated by a more dominant personality into doing something catastrophic because she promised him something he wanted badly enough. It's a familiar archetype, the submissive accomplice, the person who wouldn't have done this alone, the one who was pulled into someone else's gravity. And I held that reading for a while. It made Shahraban the architect and Sheqir the tool. Clean, tidy, the kind of framework that makes a case feel solved. Then I found out what he did from prison. While in custody, already arrested, already charged, already facing a life sentence, Sheqir K allegedly attempted to hire a fellow inmate to assassinate witnesses connected to the Doppelgänger case. Not Shahraban's witnesses. His witnesses who could testify about his involvement. People whose words, spoken in a courtroom he refused to speak in, could determine whether he spent the rest of his life in a cell. His response to that threat wasn't a statement, wasn't a rebuttal, wasn't an alibi or an explanation or even a lie. His response was to try to make the witnesses disappear. And that's when my first reading collapsed. You don't try to have witnesses killed from inside a prison cell if you're a passive follower. You don't organize a hit, even a failed one, even a clumsy one, if your fundamental orientation to this crime is, I got talked into it. That's not the behavior of someone who was swept up. That's the behavior of someone who understood exactly what was at stake, calculated his options, and chose violence over speech. Again, think about the sequence. Before the murder, silence. Sheqir never told anyone what Shahraban was planning. He didn't warn Khadidja. He didn't walk away. He got in the car during the murder. Violence. 56 stab wounds. Concentrated on the face, the very feature that was supposed to make Khadidja pass for Shahraban. He didn't just kill her, he erased her. After the arrest, silence. 11 months of nothing. And then, from inside that silence, attempted violence again, against the people whose speech could convict him. Silence. Violence. Silence. Violence. It's not a contradiction. It's a rhythm. 50 hearing days, 0 words, 1 attempted witness assassination from inside his cell. Now, I want to pull this thread one step further, because there's a comparison here that nobody made, and it's the comparison that unlocked the whole case for me. Remember the hitman? The one Shahraban paid 5,000 euros to kill Rawan's brother? That man took the money and didn't do it. He took the deposit and walked away. Whatever his reasons, cowardice, conscience, laziness, he reached the line and stopped. Sheqir didn't stop. Same basic arrangement, a woman asking a man to commit violence on her behalf, offering something in return. But the hitman balked. Sheqir followed through 56 times. So what was different about Sheqir? The prosecution says it was the promise of a relationship. Maybe. But I think that's the surface. Underneath it, there's something the psychiatrist's evaluation of Shahraban inadvertently illuminated her belief that manipulation is the best tool. Shahraban had spent her entire life inside a system where people controlled each other through leverage, through threats, through the quiet exchange of compliance for protection. And she'd been refining her ability to identify who would comply. The uncle blackmailed. Rawan endured. The men at the bars said yes and didn't mean it. The hitman took the money and didn't deliver. Each one taught her something. Each failure sharpened her selection criteria. By the time she met Sheqir, she wasn't just asking, "Would you kill for me?" She was asking it to someone she'd already identified as the person who would actually do it. How she identified him, what she saw in him that she didn't see in the others, we'll never know. Because he never said, and maybe that's precisely what she saw. The silence. Not as absence, but as capacity. A man who didn't need to perform his willingness, who didn't need to puff up at a bar and say, "I'd do anything for you" to get her attention. A man whose silence wasn't uncertainty. It was agreement. The court seemed to understand this even if they couldn't articulate exactly what made Sheqir different. When they handed down the sentence life in prison for both defendants, the presiding judge in Ingolstadt used an unusual phrase. He called it a disturbing act. And the court made a specific determination. The crime was particularly serious, which in German law means that the standard possibility of parole review after 15 years does not apply. The court press officer confirmed it directly. Probation is not an option. For Shahraban, who orchestrated the plan, that severity is expected. But for Sheqir, who the easy reading frames as a follower, a tool, a lovesick accomplice, the court applied the same maximum. The same particularly serious. The same not an option. The judges saw what I eventually saw. This wasn't a puppet and a puppeteer. This was two people who communicated in the same language, a language where silence means consent and violence means resolution, and who recognized that language in each other instantly. Both of them got life. December 19th, 2024, the courtroom in Ingolstadt closed the case. The German press reported it. Headlines cycled through the doppelganger angle one last time. And 1,200 kilometers south across the Mediterranean, in a small apartment in Oran, Algeria, a woman named Sharifa Bouche, Khadidja's mother, went to bed that night not knowing. She didn't know the trial was over. She didn't know the verdict had been reached. She didn't know her daughter's killers had been sentenced to spend the rest of their lives in prison. She wouldn't know for another 3 weeks. And the reason she wouldn't know? tells you everything about how systems treat the people they've already failed. I want to trace a timeline. Just dates, no commentary yet. See if you notice what I noticed. August 16th, 2022, Khadidja's body is discovered in the back of Shahraban's black Mercedes on a residential street in Ingolstadt. Her face is so disfigured from stab wounds that a paramedic can't form a seal with a breathing mask. Shahraban's parents find the car. They identify the body as their daughter. August 17th. Autopsy raises questions. A small tattoo on the body's arm. Shahraban's parents are adamant their daughter had no tattoos. DNA testing begins. August 18th. DNA results confirm the body is not Shahraban. The victim is identified as Khadidja O, a 3-year-old Algerian beauty blogger living in Heilbronn, a city 100 miles from where her body was found. Shahraban and Sheqir are arrested. Now, when does Khadidja's family in Iran, Algeria, find out that she's dead? 10 days. Khadidja's younger sister, Alam Baujama, says, the news didn't come from the German police. It didn't come from the Ingolstadt prosecutor's office. It didn't come from any consulate or embassy or official channel. It came from Khadidja's friends on social media. The same platform that was used to lure her to her death was the platform that carried the news of that death to her family. Friends who saw the German press coverage messaged Alam. And Alam had to be the one to tell her mother. Now, the Ingolstadt prosecutor's office disputes this. They say their files show the family in Algeria was informed, but they don't say when or how or by whom. And Alam's account hasn't changed. We didn't know anything. So I checked, why the gap? Why would a murder victim's family be the last to know? And the answer sits inside a single piece of family architecture that nobody in the German media interrogated deeply enough. Khadidja's parents were divorced. Her father lives in Germany. Her mother, Sharifa Bouch, lives in Algeria with Alam and the rest of the family. The divorce was described as contentious. The father has no contact with the family in Algeria. And under German law, the father, as a parent living in the jurisdiction, was eligible to be a co-plaintiff in the trial. He was. He was assigned a court-appointed lawyer. He was represented. But nobody asked the obvious question, does the father talk to the mother? Does his representation cover the rest of the family? Does anyone in the German legal system know or care that the victim's closest relatives are in a different country, speak a different language, and have no relationship with the one family member who does have legal standing? The answer, apparently, is no, because here is what happened next. Sharifa Bouch, Khadidja's mother, has a disability. She suffered a brain hemorrhage years earlier. Her speech is impaired. Her mobility is limited. And when the information stopped coming, when the silence from Germany stretched from days into weeks into months, she did something that I still can't fully process. She got on a plane by herself. A disabled woman with impaired speech and no legal representation flew from Oran, Algeria, to Germany to find out what happened to her daughter. And when she got there, she was given an email address, a point of contact at the prosecutor's office, someone she could write to for updates. The email address was wrong. I'll say that again. The German state prosecutor's office, the same office that had been building a case around her daughter's murder for months, gave Khadidja's mother an incorrect email address. She wrote to it. Nobody answered because nobody received it. And when Business Insider later asked the prosecutor's office about this, Veronica Grieser, the same prosecutor who had presented the case against Shahraban and Sheqir in open court, said, quote, "We very much regret that the victim's mother feels inadequately informed by the authorities." Feels inadequately informed, not was failed, not was excluded, feels inadequately informed, as if the problem were emotional, as if the issue were the mother's perception, not the system's performance. So I kept pulling. The trial began in January 2024. It lasted 11 months, over 50 hearing days, 190 witnesses, one of the longest criminal proceedings in recent Bavarian history. German media covered it extensively. The Doppelgänger murder was a headline machine. Every development was reported. Every courtroom detail was analyzed. And throughout all of it, every hearing, every witness, every day, Khadidja's mother had no legal representation. Her sister had no legal representation. Nobody in Algeria was given a lawyer, offered a translator, assigned a liaison, or even sent a reliable email address. They existed outside the system entirely. Not because they were excluded by policy, but because nobody's job was to include them. And when nobody's job is to do something, nobody does it. That brings us to December 19th, 2024. The verdict: life in prison for both defendants. Particularly serious. Probation, not an option. The case is closed. The court issued a press release. The German media reported the outcome. The story cycled through one last round of doppelganger murder headlines, and then it was Christmas. And then it was New Year's. January 8th, 2025, a reporter from Business Insider, Joshua Nelken-Zitzer, messages Alam Boujama in Algeria. It's a routine follow-up. He's writing about the trial's conclusion. And that is how Khadidja's sister found out, 3 weeks after the sentencing. From a journalist, not from the court, not from the prosecutor, not from the father's lawyer, not from any official channel in any country, a reporter doing his job, delivering information that the entire German justice system decided was someone else's responsibility. Alam's response was 5 sentences. I'm going to read one of them. I don't know if there is justice. My sister is dead, she is gone, and she will not return. Now, when Business Insider asked the Ingolstadt Regional Court why the family wasn't informed, the court press officer, Thomas Schlappe, gave an answer that I've read 4 times and still can't believe is real. He said the victim's father was a co-plaintiff and was represented by a lawyer. Then he added, to what extent the father has or had contact with any relatives in Algeria is not known here. Not known here? The institution that spent 11 months reconstructing every detail of Khadidja's death, her Instagram messages, her GPS location, the angle of every stab wound, the DNA under every fingernail, did not know whether her father talked to her mother. So I need to reframe something, because everyone focused on whether Shahraban and Khadidja looked alike. That was the media's question for 2.5 years. The doppelganger, the resemblance, the thriller novel twist. And it's a good question for a headline, but the right question is different. The right question is, why did German institutions treat Khadidja's family the same way Shahraban treated Khadidja? As if they didn't exist. As if proximity was the same as connection. As if having one person technically in the system meant everyone adjacent to that person was covered. As if the absence of a complaint was the same as the presence of justice. Shahraban assumed that if a body was in the car and the face was destroyed, nobody would look closer. She was wrong. Forensics caught it in a day. The German court assumed that if the father was in the courtroom and had a lawyer, the family was represented. They were wrong too, but nobody caught that because there was no forensic test for it. No DNA swab that reveals whether a mother in Algeria knows her daughter's killers were sentenced. No autopsy that detects a wrong email address. The system that convicted Shahraban for treating Khadidja as disposable then treated Khadidja's family as disposable. Not with malice, not with intent, just with the quiet, bureaucratic confidence that someone else was handling it. And that might be the most honest mirror this case holds up. Because silence doesn't need a motive. It doesn't need cruelty. It doesn't need a woman with a list of Instagram accounts and a man willing to stab a stranger 56 times. Silence just needs everyone in the chain to assume that the next person will speak. The uncle assumed the blackmail would handle it. The father assumed the threat would handle it. The hitman assumed the money was enough and walked away. The 25 women assumed the weird DM was someone else's problem. Loon assumed the warning was enough. Instagram assumed the first account being exposed meant the threat was over. The court assumed the father's lawyer was enough. And Khadidja, who did everything right, who checked the source, who listened to the warning, assumed that saying no once meant the danger had passed. Every single assumption was reasonable, and every single one was wrong. Not because the people making them were bad, but because silence is the default. And the default, repeated across enough people and enough institutions, across enough days and enough kilometers, is lethal. Before I close this, I want to do something I try to do with every case I analyze. I want to turn the lens around. Not to accuse, just to get close enough that you can feel the glass. 25 women received a message from a stranger on Instagram. Some version of a too good to be true offer. A music video, a beauty treatment, a collaboration. And 25 of them did some version of the same thing. They looked at it, maybe frowned slightly, maybe scrolled past, maybe blocked the account, maybe just closed the app and went on with their day. None of them reported it. Not to Instagram, not to anyone. And I want to be very clear, none of them did anything wrong. There is no moral obligation to investigate every suspicious DM that slides into your inbox. You'd never do anything else. The volume of scams, spam, fake accounts, and weird pitches that any woman with an Instagram account receives in a given week is staggering. You develop a filter. You learn to ignore. It's not negligence, it's survival. But here's the thing that I can't stop thinking about. If even one of those 25 women had hit report instead of ignore, the account might have been flagged. Maybe reviewed, maybe removed. And maybe the second account, the one that reached Khadidja 2 days after the first one failed, would have triggered an automated pattern. Same device, same IP range, same targeting criteria, same woman behind the screen, opening a new tab every time one got closed. Maybe, I don't know. Instagram's reporting system is opaque and inconsistent, and there's no guarantee a report would have done anything. But we'll never know because nobody filed one. And Loon, who did the right thing, who warned Khadidja directly, who said it's fake, Sis within hours didn't report the impersonation account either. Or if she did, it wasn't removed before Shahraban's next message went out 48 hours later. The warning was personal. It saved Khadidja from one message. It didn't save her from the next. I'm not building a case against those 25 women. I'm not building a case against Loon. I'm not building a case against anyone who's ever looked at something suspicious online and decided it wasn't their problem. I'm asking a smaller question, a quieter one. How many times have you seen something that felt off a message, a comment, an account, a story someone told you that didn't add up, and your first thought was, someone else will deal with this? Not because you're cruel, not because you don't care, but because the effort of doing something feels disproportionate to the threat, because reporting feels pointless, because you don't have the full picture, because it's probably nothing, because you're busy, because it's not your problem. 25 women thought that, a rapper thought that, a platform thought that, a prosecutor's office thought that, a court press officer thought that, a father with a lawyer thought that, and a 2-3-year-old woman who wanted to be an interpreter, who loved learning languages, who worked at a cafe and dreamed about having kids of her own, got into a car because the silence between all those assumptions was wide enough for someone to drive through. None of us are Shahraban, none of us are Sheqir, but every single one of us has been one of the 25, and the difference between a DM that goes nowhere and a DM that ends a life isn't the person who sends it. It's whether anyone along the chain decides that silence isn't good enough. 2 quotes. That's all I want to leave you with. The first is from Veronica Grieser, the state prosecutor who led the case against Shahraban and Sheqir in Ingolstadt. When asked why Khadidja's family in Algeria was never properly informed about the trial or the verdict, she said, We very much regret that the victim's mother feels inadequately informed by the authorities. The second is from Alam Boujama, Khadidja's younger sister, living in Oran, Algeria. She learned that her sister's killers had been sentenced to life in prison from a journalist. 3 weeks after the verdict, she said, "I don't know if there is justice. My sister is dead. She is gone, and she will not return." The distance between those two statements is 1,200 kilometers. It's also the entire case